Comic Book Savant, episode 439. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, we're going to be having a discussion or comparison between two movies that were very similar. That one recently came out not too long ago in theaters, which is X-Men Dark Phoenix, or just Dark Phoenix, and X-Men Last Stand. They're both movies that are based on the Dark Phoenix saga storyline and from the X-Men comic books that has been produced in movie form, and we're going to kind of compare and contrast them and do a versus. When I did the episode a few weeks back where I was doing a review for Dark Phoenix, I spoke on how I felt like certain things were similar, and I wanted to take a deeper dive. And some of you guys in the Savant Society Facebook group voiced that you wanted me to you wanted to see when I released that episode, once I mentioned doing a comparison podcast talking about the two, taking a deeper dive into similarities and differences. You guys were really for it, so it encouraged me to move forward in doing this episode. But before we get into this episode, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comic Podcast Network. So if you're looking for similar content to what I produce here on this podcast, is a great place to go. It's a one-stop shop for multiple podcasts of similar content. They have literally hundreds of different podcasts listed there, from a single person podcast like myself to roundtable discussions to podcasts on that's specific to publisher, to certain characters, teams, all that different kind of stuff. So it's a really one-stop shop to find a ton of content. If you like what I do here and you're reaching out to find more things to listen to, it's a great resource. And I also want to throw this out as well, because I don't talk about it enough. It is a good resource if you're an up-and-coming podcaster and you're wanting to become a part of a network. It's no fees associated attached to it. Sometimes, occasionally, they will ask for donations to help pay for the web hosting cost for the site. And we all chip in like a minimal amount because there's so many members to keep that going for another few years. But it's a great network to get in, to connect it to help gain exposure and help if you're just starting out, you're trying to get a listener base that you can, help you gain some exposure and gain listeners to gain some momentum to your show, especially when you're first starting out. It's very helpful in helping to grow an audience. So it can be used if you're just looking to listen to more comic book related podcasts, or if you're a comic book podcaster looking to, you're starting out and you're trying to build an audience, it can be a great resource tool as well. So definitely, if you have a moment, go by the Comics Podcast Network over at comicspodcast.com. And with all that being said, let's get into the meat of the episode, which is talking about X-Men Last Stand versus Dark Phoenix. And this is a confusing part because I was just seeing some story coming out at San Diego Comic-Con that it was so confusing, because I thought one of the first teaser trailers they showed for X-Men Dark Phoenix, it said X-Men Dark Phoenix on it, but then they were calling it Dark Phoenix. Now they said for the home theater release, because that date was recently announced, that they were saying that when it comes out on home video, that they're changing the name from Dark Phoenix to X-Men Dark Phoenix. I was always calling it X-Men Dark Phoenix because I thought the first information when they first were announcing the project was X-Men Dark Phoenix. But apparently it was this Dark Phoenix, and now they're putting the X-Men moniker back in front of it. It's neither here nor there. So again, I thought this would be a good idea, because this is the first time I really kind of did this, because this is the first time we've had kind of two movies done many years apart from one another kind of coming, being so similar in the same content made by the same studio. And the funny thing about it was Simon Kinberg was co-writer on X-Men Last Stand with Zach Penn, and then he wrote and directed X-Men Dark Phoenix. That I was really confused on how, if they didn't do the best job the first time, why would they let him now write another shot at it and do it again? It basically, it's kind of weird to me. Now, as far as the, at the time, X-Men Last Stands was panned by fans and critics, but it still made a profit. It was successful in in the movie theater. So you might not like the movie, but it performed. And I remember specifically when I went to go see the movie at the theater at the time. Me and my best friend went to go see it when it came out, and people were like, applauding at the end of the movie. They enjoyed the movie, for what it was, and it was a product of the time. And I think now the quality of just superhero movies in general, you can't really, what you could get away with back then is way different than things that you can get away with now, because the standards are so much higher when it comes in relation to comic book films. And we've had huge hits like Avengers Endgame, Infinity War. The quality is just, so the bar has been raised so high. And I mean, even for its standards at the time, when you go back and you watch it, because I went back and watched, X-Men Last Stand, and, I came to this consensus, going back watching both the movies, and I compared my notes that I had from when I originally did a review for Last Stand, and then I was looking at, the notes, and I didn't want to go in, being looking for things that were similar. I just think they were very blaring, because I hadn't watched X-Men Last Stand in like many years, so it was like really brushing it out. And I didn't go back and look at my notes for Dark Phoenix at all. I just went back, watched Last Stand, and took it in for what it was, and it was like just so blaring. Certain similarities. It was like they were basically in the core script, very, very similar, but just certain things were rearranged, or different characters were swapped out. And, it was talk about the third act of Dark Phoenix was drastically changed. It was supposed to be a space battle, but what the effects they were going for with Phoenix having like the red fiery glow, once the acquisition of Fox was going on with Disney, and they heard about what the final scene was, the talk is that it mirrored too closely to the ending of Captain Marvel and her space scene. So then they decided to totally redo the whole ending of the movie and change it to the train sequence that we kind of got in the actual finished product of the film. Now, I think I would have preferred them to go ahead and do the space scene, even if it was similar. It had similar beats. It would have been its own thing because it was an X-Men movie, and I think it would have maybe made the scale of the movie a little bit grander. So, like I said, going back, wasn't looking at the notes or how I rated it, one movie to the other. I just, like I said, I took it in as its own piece. And one thing that kind of that stood out to me, the general plot between the two movies are very similar. Both times it focused, one of the main story beats focused on Charles decided to make mental blocks in Jean's mind to help her control her powers and for creating this alter ego. One movie, and Last Stand, it was kind of like she understood what he did, and she was kind of a willing participant in a way, where more so in Dark Phoenix, it was done unbeknownst to her, and so when it's exposed, it's kind of like a betrayal. But he was aware that she had this alter ego that in Last Stand that was called Phoenix, that was the wild side or whatever that they kind of had to repress. So he's very aware of what was going on when that switch happened and she reappeared. That secret kind of came out. Now, so it paints kind of Xavier in a bad light in both films. I think they played it up more in Dark Phoenix as a more serious plot point, and that it was a betrayal of once when different people found out, they kind of it shed a different light on Charles Xavier, and also too in Dark Phoenix, the world is a very much different place following the events of the previous movie in the years that passed. Mutants were widely accepted. They were, publicized in press, the merchandise, and in a way, Charles kind of had become a egomaniac, a victim of his own success. He was drinking too much of his own Kool-Aid, and he was really feeling himself. And in this kind of this shift from the events of the Dark Phoenix emerging and damage being done, like totally overnight destroys the relationship between humans and mutants, and he was a liaison to the White House and all of that quickly goes down once the Phoenix emerges and does some horrendous things. So those are similar because it is in the original X-Men trilogy of movies, which the Last Stand was the last of that before we got the X-Men First Class, which links back to the Dark Phoenix kind of a line of movies at that point. This was what the original X-Men cast. In those three movies, it's very much focused on the war between humans and mutants and them trying to come together and find some kind of peace in a world where mutants could be safe. And we have Beast working as a liaison with the president, and this company, this pharmaceutical company, ran by Angel's father, Warren Worthington, is making this drug to create a cure for mutants if they wanted to get rid of their powers. And so that is a big debate going back and forth on that, and Magneto using this as a catalyst to start this war that he's always wanted between humans and mutants, for mutants to take their rightful place as the superior beings and rule. So the flip side of that, we have this race that planet was destroyed by the Phoenix entity that inhabits Jean in Dark Phoenix, and they're trying to use and manipulate her to get the power so then they could destroy the Earth or make it inhabitable for them being the refugees of their destroyed planet to take over Earth. So in both sides or both forms of this adaptation, it is some outside influence that is trying to gain control of Jean and try to manipulate her to use her to their own goals. And Last Stand, instead of it being the Jessica Chastain character, it is Magneto trying to get her on his side to be that extra deterrent to really force the conflict between humans and mutants, and really to be able to take over. And they're very similar. They're both like in her ear trying to manipulate her. I feel like it was more devastation caused by the Phoenix in Last Stand, because we see that she murders Scott at the beginning of the movie. When she reemerges, she kills Professor Xavier. in the movie, and she kills tons of people in the main final scene where they're attacking Alcatraz to get to the cure and get the Artite or Artie, that is the mutant, or is it Leech? I mean, maybe I think it's Leech. Excuse me. That has the ability or the power to, if other mutants are in range, he negates their power. So they're using samples from him to create this cure, and they're trying to get him. So on both, it's like this big battle ensues where, again, Jean is mainly being manipulated, but she definitely causes a lot of damage that we get to see. We don't get to see in Dark Phoenix a scene where the Phoenix entity destroys the planet of what's the Volk and her people. I can't remember what the race of her people were, but they're refugees. We don't get to see any of that. That backstory seems kind of tacked on, and it's revealed through some exposition and some dialogue throughout the movie that's what it was, and they were tracking down the Dark Phoenix entity when it's coming towards Earth, and then they have the space mission at the beginning of Dark Phoenix where Jean is saving the astronauts, and then she gets caught in the middle of the entity, and then it embodies her, and it goes from there. I think both scripts did a good job. That it was tension. Once going back to the point I was making about the mental blocks or the mental gateways or the roadblocks Charles installed in Jean's mind to kind of keep the Phoenix at bay for all these years. And Dark Phoenix is a conflict between Charles and Beast or Hank in regards to him doing that, and I think it's really played up more in Dark Phoenix than what it is in Last Stand. Wolverine or Logan confronts Charles, and he was like, "I don't have to answer to you, and I don't have to explain myself to you," and it's kind of dropped where this thread of Charles kind of stepping over the line is really carried through Hank for the majority of the movie, and affects a lot of decisions that he makes throughout the film. And again, then there's also a lot of similarities between Magneto and Jessica Chastain's Volk, where they both pretty much are serving a similar purpose in the movie. They're like the agitator. They're the kind of devil on Jean's shoulder, egging her along on taking that next step to fully letting go and unleash that Phoenix persona for their own kind of gains. So that's very similar. Mystique's death and how it's set up in Dark Phoenix is very similar to the build-up for Professor Xavier's death from Last Stand. I think the difference was they had already spoiled and confirmed Mystique's death in the trailer. It's pretty much foreshadowed, and then they came out and confirmed it in interviews before the movie was released. So I felt like maybe if they hadn't, it would have carried the similar kind of weight or feel when we saw Professor Xavier kind of when she kills him in Last Stand. It carries an emotional impact. We already knew that was going to happen, and they when they kind of set it up and was like, it's going to be even more destruction. But really, it's kind of off screen how it's done when they kill Mystique off. And then I guess it's other deaths, but it's mainly to the what I'm going to say nameless race of aliens that we have littering the movie. Like I said, that's a plot point that's very poorly developed throughout the movie that I felt like was kind of a waste, where in Last Stand, it was a culmination of the two previous movies, and it was things that were built up of previous plot points were coming into fruition and coming into play. So it felt more, looking at the two movies, that felt more substantial and on a grander scale, because this was a culmination of things and a lot of plot points were kind of being resolved. Where in Dark Phoenix, this movie really comes out of nowhere because you're feeling like you missed so much of a huge chunk where X-Men Apocalypse ends off, and where we kind of see the mutants are. It's like it's a whole decade later. we've missed like all their adventures. We get this small space adventure, which triggers all the events that propels the movie forward from that to the end. But we don't really get, we had that team that we had just got that team assembled in the last movie. So it really felt small in scale, and it felt like it was a huge chunk that we missed between Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. It wasn't, this should have been the culmination of this storyline, be it if it was another movie. I understand probably that, and it was talks at one point or rumors going around in Hollywood that this was supposed to be, X-Men Dark Phoenix was supposed to be a two-parter, but once it, the acquisition of Fox got approved, a lot of things changed, and they just wanted to get the one movie out there. It was already in production, and they just kind of went with that. I think it maybe would have helped because a lot of things could have been more developed between part one and part two, but it is feeling like it's a lot missing. And with it being the Dark Phoenix saga and how grand a storyline it was in the comics, this felt so small. And I didn't think anything else could feel smaller than Last Stand, but Last Stand seems like a way bigger movie in scope and scale than what Dark Phoenix was. And I talked about this in the original review where the budgets were drastically, different. X-Men Dark Phoenix, had almost I think it was like a $175 million budget or something like that, where at the time I think Last Stand had like less than 100. So it was crazy. It was way more substantial amount of money put in the movie. And I understand inflation, because let's see, when did the two movies came out? We had Dark Phoenix coming out in 2019, and then X-Men Last Stand came out in 2006. So it's like 13 years different. So definitely, the cost of making movies are totally different. But when you look at the two movies, it looks like Last Stand is a better made movie in certain aspects. Not saying that visual wise that Dark Phoenix is a slouch, but you just wonder where that budget was so massive, where did that money go? And then we wonder about that final sequence, how far were they doing the visual effects for that, when it was decided that they scrapped that and totally do a reshoot of the whole kind of third act to kind of fit that in. A lot of money could have went to that, and also you have to think about Jennifer Lawrence really didn't want to come back to do the films, and so they probably had to spend a lot of money for the core group of Jennifer Lawrence, Michael Fassbender, Nicholas Hoult, and James McAvoy kind of coming back. They probably got a good paydays for coming back to kind of finish off this series. And they did, at first they just said, they just publicized Dark Phoenix, but then they really start, I guess after, buzz and projections that this movie was going to tank and do bad, that they really pushed it, that it was the end of an era. And they did commercials where they even had, Logan, what's his name? I'm saying Logan. Hugh Jackman coming in as it's the end of an era, and James McAvoy, it's like this is end of this journey with this group, and this is the last Fox X-Men movie. They use that as a marketing tactic to kind of push that out there pretty heavy. I don't know what to say. Like I said, the movies are just it's kind of laughable when you see the similarities in the movie. In both movies, Storm felt a certain kind of way towards Jean when she turns and embraces the Dark Phoenix persona of her. They're pretty much exactly the same reaction, but again, where in Last Stand it's downplayed. I feel like Alexandra Shipp, she acted that up better, and definitely feel like they were close. There was a betrayal there, but Halle Berry had way more screen time in Last Stand than Alexandra Shipp had in in Dark Phoenix. And I wish it was kind of, reversed, because Halle Berry, much as I love her as an actress and I followed her whole career, like, I felt like this was one of her worst acting gigs that she had throughout the 3 movies. That, I felt like they kind of they gave her extra scenes, but they felt kind of empty in this movie. Where I wish they gave that same amount of time kind of to Alexandra Shipp, because she felt more like Storm than Halle Berry ever did in all 3 of the X-Men films combined, to be honest with you, in the little time that she had on screen. Also, both films, it was, the person pursuing Jean, trying to find her. It was just a switch of, in The Last Stand, Logan was trying to pursue Jean to save her, where Hank was trying to pursue her with Magneto to try to kill her to avenge Mystique's death. So, but that plot thread again was very similar. Also very similar, we had, the mobile caravan where Mystique was being held and being transported, and they attack it, similar to the train sequence at the end of Dark Phoenix, where they're on a train transporting the mutants after they've been caught from their battle in New York, and Phoenix and the aliens attack the moving train. They're very similar. I could also say the part where Nightcrawler kind of snaps when he's trying to save the guards, and the aliens keep killing the guards, and he's telling the one guy he's going to save him, and he kind of snaps, and he kind of he goes boofing crazy, and is killing people left and right, which, number one, that's uncharacteristic of Nightcrawler. He doesn't kill. His whole base of his characters is how his religion is everything to him. But it reminded me with how he was boofing all over the place, doing the cool moves and maneuvers. It was similar to X2 in a way, in that whole beginning sequence where Nightcrawler is being mind controlled and he's doing the attack on the White House in ways. So it was shades of where I felt where Simon Kinberg was borrowing a lot from his previous material, and him pitching this and them actually allowing him to make the same movie, just shuffling different aspects and different characters around. They're in the baseline, like I said, you just feel the similarities. And like, soon as you sit back, like, soon as I started watching Last Stand, and like I said, I was just taking it in as I watched. It's like, yeah, you can't miss it. If you've seen one, you've seen the other, essentially. They just transpose with, this goes here. It's like putting a puzzle together. But in this puzzle, you can take the 2 different puzzles side by side and just take pieces from one to fill the other, and vice versa. And, I don't know how I feel about that at the end. And the funny thing was, I re-rated Last Stand after watching the movie, not looking at what I scored Dark Phoenix as. And then it came out that ultimately I scored them exactly the same. They both got a 6.5 out of 10. And I used the same criteria to vote for any that I used when I do the grading to come up with my ratings. I rate on the acting on a 10-point scale, casting on a 10-point scale, direction, special effects, and story. And without looking at what I reviewed on the one till after I did the Last Stand, because that was the one I was rewatching, they came out exactly the same. But I would have to say, after watching both movies, I feel like Last Stand, probably I would watch that again before I would watch Dark Phoenix. Now, I've only seen it the one time. I didn't go back out to movies to see it. I've seen it relatively recently from when I did the review. So, maybe that might change after Dark Phoenix comes out on home video and I can view it again, because like I said in my review of the movie, I'm a completionist. I have all the other Fox X-Men movies. I'm a completionist, so I'll get it to my collection. But where it sits right now, even though I scored them the same, I feel like X-Men The Last Stand is a slightly better movie because it feels more substantial, where Dark Phoenix feels so muted, so small, so underwhelming. as an overall adventure and movie, that I think I enjoyed the ride more in Last Stand than I did in Dark Phoenix. And I think certain beats, the emotional beats of Scott being killed, Xavier, that's a huge moment. Even the end credit scene they have at the very end, where we find out that Xavier transported his consciousness to the comatose body on Muir Island. And you see Magneto powers are starting to come back because he gets hit with one of the darts of the cure, so he thought his power is lost, and you see him out playing chess, and then he's able to manipulate one of the pieces, and you get that other after credit scene where Xavier does the transfer of conscience. And those things are like, wow, like he just better. There's no end sequence to Dark Phoenix. They have a similar scene too, and this is funny. They have a similar scene where Charles is somewhere. The school is still going on, and all that. They name it the Jean Grey School, and I don't know why, because that comes way later in the X-Men as far as comic books, but whatever. And then he's out, in a cafe or whatever, and Magneto finds him, and then they play kind of chess, so it's still kind of a nod back to what he did in other movies. So it's just like a lot of senseless things that just mirrored and reflected that could have been better choices made in the scripting. I feel like Simon Kinberg did a decent job in directing the film. I don't feel like he did any better or worse than what Brett Ratner did on Last Stand. But again, it's a good comparison to make if you guys have time, or if you're like me, you're a completionist and you already own like Last Stand and you're going to get Dark Phoenix when it comes out. You could do a similar comparison. And the point, or if you have seen both, let me know, comment. You can always email me at comicbooksavant@gmail.com, or just go over to the website, comicbooksavant.com, and go to the contact us page. You can email me directly from the webpage and let me know, do you agree with my consensus and thoughts on the two films? If you disagree, let me know that as well. That's all I really have for this episode. Like I said, I wanted to do like a breakdown and analysis, and it was fun revisiting Last Stand, because if it wasn't for this, I don't think I would have any reason to go back and revisit it, like that. But so it was fun going back, watching that movie, and how people, dogged that movie for so long and saying how horrible it was. And it's like, I don't know if they could ever make an X-Men movie worse than this, and maybe they have slightly, but like I said, being fair and judging the two movies, they came out kind of a tie. But for my personal preference, I nudged towards Last Stand. So was it really as bad as we thought it was now that we have something else that could be considered a little worse? I mean, it was definitely not the success that Last Stand was financially, because, Fox took a big L on this, even releasing this movie at this point. They had already invested so much in it. And it's been noted that it's going down as one of the biggest flop of the year as far as for Fox. But, they had to do what they had to do to get this out. Then acquisition was coming. They were already knee deep in it, so they had to try to recoup as much money as possible by releasing it and seeing what it will get. And I think it will do, for the people that didn't go see it in theaters, I think people will probably do better in home video release, but I think it's a little too late for that to save anything. It's still going to be a huge flop. And with the push they made in marketing, they put a lot of money into the marketing of the film as well. So they're never going to even come close to break even on this movie, no matter how well it sells in home video. And that's a sad thing. And it's sad that seeing it come to the end, but probably in the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to have this whole thing redone under the MCU banner. And it's already been hinted by Kevin Feige and Hall H that the mutants will be coming at some point, probably in the next 3 to 4 years from now. So we'll have it recast and start over again, and we can see now if the MCU will do better than what Fox did over the years. I think Fox did an admirable job. Not every movie was a grand slam, but they had some really good X-Men movies as well. It was just too inconsistent across the board for it to last, hence why they were in a position why they had to sell in the first place. But I still enjoyed them for what they were, and it helped push and made competition for Marvel Studios to step their game up with the movies they were putting out, because they had to use lesser characters and really maximize their potential, which they did to great success. But that's all I have for this episode, everyone. As always, if you like what I do here, you want to consider supporting the show, consider becoming a Patreon. You can go over at patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. There are different tiers with different bonuses. So for your support, I try to make it, something that you get something of value back in return for helping support the show. So you can go there, check the different tiers out, and see if you want to become a patron and help support the show. I appreciate you guys. I see it that, you guys really do a great job and retweeting out episodes and showing me mad love whenever I drop new content here or on the YouTube channel. That support goes a long way. I tell you guys, I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you haven't been over to the YouTube channel, definitely go over, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification, and check out the videos. It's, I think, about 124, 125 videos, original videos, comic book related videos I've done over on the YouTube channel at this point. It's been a little bit over 2 years that I've had that going, and it's grown, and it's a library of great content there for you guys, free of charge, to go over and check out. If you're a fan of what I do here, you want more of it, and you get to see my ugly mug in the process. You get to see what I look like. So check that out as well. And that's really it. I think I've hit you guys enough with all the spiel. Follow me on social media at Comic Book Savant on Twitter and Instagram. Drop me a follow there. And that's all I have for you guys for this week. So you guys stay safe. I'll talk to you again next week for another episode of Comic Book Savant. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.